Crossing the Karman Line and entering space isn't so bad. It's the descent that'll get you. Along with designing and flying my first suborbital crewed vessel, I also worked towards the integration of my first orbit-capable rocket. Along the way, my pilots demonstrate that gliding down from the upper reaches of the atmosphere is a tad more than trivial. Let's get started. In the last episode, I unlocked satellite-era materials science, the tech from which got me modifying an orbit-capable rocket that I've been playing with. In fact, I was happy enough with the result that I began the construction of a new launch complex for it. A complex that will take over 6 months to build, which leaves me plenty of time to continue fiddling with this rocket. There is a lot available in this tech node, so it deserves being looked at a little more closely. The first thing to note is that there are actually two new materials available for tanks and structure: balloon tanks and isogrid structure tanks. The rocket I designed used only balloon tanks, but I want to play with the isogrid tanks to get a feel for the advantages of each. But there's still a lot more to look at here. We have the Caster 1 and 2 radial decouplers. We have modular isogrid tanks, modular balloon tanks. So we're getting more of these pre-made tanks. We also have these, I want to try these out. They're balloons and isogrid and conventional structures. Just these are the same thing but different materials, but they're right based on the Atlas design. So rather than building tanks straight from the procedural parts, though this one's, I think also you can scale up and down, so it's somewhat procedural, but you can just flat out so I want to try and build that rocket that I built just right out of those and see how that works out. We have a modular booster tank, isogrid. That looks like it's asymmetric, something like for a radial, like you would get on a Soyuz or something like that, a radial full tank. Again, modular tanks, but isogrid. So these are all about and then look, like sort of Saturn style, the Katniss part pack tank, sort of Saturn style tanks. Again, it's the different materials. Then we have here modular landing tanks. This is a fuel tank. Okay, so this is a service module. This is a fuel tank, conventional fuel tank. This is an isogrid conventional fuel tank. See, I didn't really play with any of these. Then we got a nose cone tank. And then we have these radial spherical tanks. Again, oh, these are both oh no, one's a radial and one's a inline, I think. We have a toroidal tank, isogrid structure. We have then a whole stack of stock parts. So a lot to play with here, and play I did, eventually settling on a design that, though not the cheapest option, I'm hoping will be relatively easy to scale up as my payloads get bigger later in the game. I'm hoping for this vessel to be the feature vessel next episode, and at that time I will go over the build in much greater detail. In the meantime, this is not the only vehicle that may benefit from these new materials. 2 episodes ago, my U-2 high-altitude jet cruised at an altitude of 25 kilometers, which unlocked a subsequent contract to cruise at 30 kilometers. Also, last episode, my CF-104 was able to maintain a speed of 700 meters per second, but couldn't achieve the next benchmark of 800 meters per second. I'm hoping that making these jets lighter with some balloon tanks for structure will allow them to reach these new milestones, but unfortunately that turned out not to be the case. If I'm going to go for these contracts, I think I'm going to need better engines. Finally, before we get to some actual missions, I have to go into the administration building to choose myself a chief designer. This position became available back when I unlocked the basic rocketry tech node, which was actually over 4 game months ago. This just slipped under my radar. I decided to go with Sergei Kurylev, which provides me with a 10% speed bonus on vessel integration, rollout and recovery, and a 5% integration speed bonus on human-rated vehicles. This came with a cost of a 7% speed decrease on materials node research. But the next materials science node isn't for a while, so I thought this was a good direction to go. But with all that out of the way, it's now time for Evelyn Wolf to take the X-6 rocket plane out for its second flight. We're we're looking at the high altitude science, trying to get a bit more of that, and hopefully getting a little bit more crew report. And what I'm doing is I'm actually over the Gulf of Mexico heading towards the Florida Peninsula rather than the other way around, which I've done every other time. So we're heading actually right into the sun, into the east. And the idea here is to collect some crew reports, because once you're over 40 kilometers you can collect crew reports, but I got all the crew reports over the water because I've done this type of a mission over the water just so many times. And what I want to do, I don't have all the crew reports over the forest or over the shores. Now shores is going to be a tricky business. There we go, we're getting our high altitude flight. And I want to keep my throttle under some control. Let's put on RCS. And again, I don't want to get above 75 kilometers, but I also, I don't know, last time I think I let myself get too slow. So I want to maximize the amount of time we're up here for. Okay, apoapsis, come on, bring that under control here. Lowering throttle. If I let this engine fail, or turn off, it won't ignite on me again. But I'm wondering, yeah, I don't want it above 75, but I'm thinking once this is close to, once this maybe caps out a bit. Yeah, because we should be leveling off at 70, and then I'm going to give her the beans. Give her the beans. Give her the beans. Why are you pitching up? Okay, don't give her the beans. I think we're losing attitude control is what's happening here. I want to keep going up. I wanted this here keep going up. Yeah, I think there's some thrust imbalance still with this thing. I think we lost attitude control when I gave it the beans. But we are collecting this high altitude science. We are just cockpit is okay. We have to cut. We have to cut and come back down. I can't fool with this. I cannot fool with this. Come on, bring her back down. You can see the little green bar coming up. If this bar gets to the top, Evelyn will die. But we just got to get below 75 and we're okay. Okay, we're okay. We're okay. Let's set our set on the runway here. Put this on the waypoint. We've got a drop angle of 16 degrees. So let's put this to 20. Maybe 25. Last time we dropped down pretty steeply too. So that's okay. Put this at 300. We don't need... Here we go. And lots of flaps. It's okay. Here we go. This is the scary part. Slowing down. Oh no. We're okay. We're okay. We're okay. We just need to slow down a lot. Slow down a lot. 15 degrees because it's a 10 degree. Is this moderated? It is. RCS is doing nothing. Turn that off. Alright, got full flaps and we're slowing down. Looking at the science archive on the way down, I can see that I have aboard 1.4 of high altitude flight science, but there is only 2.4 left to collect, so 2 more of these flights should finish us off easily. So, after Evelyn Wolf got the X6 down with admittedly a little bit of a bounce, it was time to recover, refurbish, and remount so Kenneth Taylor could have his turn. So this is now the 3rd flight of this plane, the inaugural flight of which was last episode, but what I'm really looking forward to is the unlocking of the X-15 cockpit, which is vacuum rated and will allow this plane to actually cross the Karman Line. You'll be seeing that a little later this episode, but I want to squeeze everything I can out of this plane first. It really does like to blow past this Apo. So let's reduce our throttle. Try and keep that Apo from going so high. I think it's just the attitude control that it has issues with. Oh, and it has, because there is some thrust torque issues, I think the attitude control is better with the throttle lower. So that might be the better plan there, but you can see it struggling. Again, our Apo is above. No, I'm gonna have to cut the throttle again. Sorry. I can't get... There we go. We're above. I don't like it. Okay, back here to 300. We can drop at an angle of about 20 degrees towards the runway. It's trying to pitch down, but it's very, very much struggling. We should be starting to get some crew reports soon, too. Now high over the water. There should be a brief being over the shores. Should be kicking on. Where's our shores? There, see shores very briefly, but and then it goes. I'm just curious how much of this I got left. Oh, if I can stay above 40 kilometers for about another minute and 15 seconds, should be able to finish. Probably maybe not this flight, but next flight. I'm hoping both of these can be finished for next flight. We'll see how it goes. But right now we're coming down. I got to pay attention to what we're doing. Coming in a little more flaps. Nope, moderate the G's is not on. Every once in a while it likes to turn that off. Turn this to 15. Whoa, 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 whoa! Can I abort? Okay, just wait. How do you... I don't have the ejection seat set to anything. We're still slowing down. I don't know what happened there. Eject. Can we eject safely? I think so. Let's watch the speed. We'll wait. Thankfully, the capsule survived all that. I'm not quite sure what happened. That was a little scary. Okay, we're starting to pick up speed, so eject. And his parachute is good. Should have that on an abort action group. We look like we are dropping on our Lando, aren't we? That, obviously, is a complete loss of the plane. Oh gosh, why does his head feel light? CO2 poisoning? What for? Why? Why? The CO2 level... Oh, the CO2 levels are dropping. His CO2 levels are dropping. Okay. Boom. Okay. Kenneth is down. A little bit of a face plant, but that's okay. He seems okay, so let's do the old recoveroo and investigate what happened there. So after an investigation, it was determined that the culprit were these control surfaces right here on the elevators. And specifically their mass strength multiplier, which if you look there is at 0.3%. But if you actually look at the actual body of the elevators, let's kind of scroll in here a bit, right there, that structural part actually has a mass strength multiplier of 0.6%, twice as much as the elevators. So if you look here, you notice that the control surfaces are huge. They're more than half the surface area of the whole elevator. So you might be wondering, why is this half the strength of this when it represents such a bigger area? That actually is just kind of the evolution of the design. In the previous X-planes, the elevators were much smaller, and on one of the X-plane iterations, I ended up increasing that. But it was recognized actually fairly early on with the X-planes that as I was getting more powerful engines, I needed more powerful or stronger elevators. They were snapping off. So I increased the strength of the elevator, but not the control surface, because back then the control surface was really small. Then later I increased the size of the control surface, but never increased the strength of the material itself. So I think I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to put that back to 0.6, just like with the rest of this. I think because if you look really close at the video, you'll notice the actual structure of the elevator did not break off, just the control surface. But of course, then you've lost control of the craft, and you know, mayhem ensued after that. Unfortunately, the loss of the entire vehicle means that it will have to be completely rebuilt, a process that will take a little shy of 2 months. But only 2 days after that, hypersonic flight will be unlocked, giving me the vacuum-rated X-15 cockpit. So it looks like the X6 is going to be rebuilt, only to be modified again right away. So we'll time warp to that, but then I noticed that I have solid rocket engines coming up after hypersonic flight. But I also have an upcoming first scientific satellite contract which requires me to collect cosmic ray science. That needs specific scientific equipment, either a Geiger-Müller counter or a scintillation counter, and the former of those, along with some other scientific instruments, is found in the Satellite Era Science Tech node. So I should research that as soon as possible. Unfortunately, that node requires Satellite Era electronics research to be done first, so I adjusted the research queue accordingly. Both of these two nodes will be done by the end of the year. Exciting stuff is coming, but for now, why don't we take a closer look at what comes with the unlocking of hypersonic flight. This was actually the furthest out I am on the tech tree. Kind of jumping ahead here. The X-15 cockpit, and then we got an X-15 inline cockpit, also rated for suborbital flight of the X-15 class. So these two look very similar to each other. It's just depending upon your design. We have jet conformal attitude jets, a generic conformal RCS thruster. Use this for attitude control or translation and ullage in space planes. Nice. Might look at that. Then we have a 0.625 meter fuselage pressurized. This is just a fuel tank. Again, these are all for suborbital reentries. And then we have a little cargo bay. Neato. And then we have an improvement to our air launch system. I'm gonna do that right now. So might want, yeah, they even give you fuselage parts that I suspect, because they say these are rated for suborbital reentries. But I'm hoping we can just nose over the Karman Line and still get ourselves back. But that is going to require replacing the cockpit of my X-plane with the new X-15 cockpit. The transition at the back of the new cockpit is a little different, so I modified the RCS tank to try and make this a little cleaner. The change of weight at the front also required a bit of tweaking of the wing position. As well, I did some further thrust balancing to try and minimize the torque I get once the air is thinned out. You can see here that I also moved the RCS blocks further back on the fuselage, which certainly helped with attitude control, but I spent most of my time tweaking the mission profile, specifically the descent, which is getting increasingly sketchy. Coming down too shallow puts a lot of stress on the plane, but coming in too steeply has me going too fast in the lower part of the atmosphere. I'll talk about the profile I ended up with when this plane actually flies in a little bit, but right now I'll point out that this plane, now dubbed the X7, isn't scheduled to be completed for another 9 months. That just isn't acceptable, but the new launch complex is due for completion next month, which will free up a lot of funds. Due to my staff purge last episode, I only have 12 engineers, so I hired 70 more to get this plane built more quickly. But to make me feel a little bit better about my budget, I brought down my research staff from 550 to 500. Then came time to start getting Kenneth and Evelyn trained up for their new cockpit. And we're going to do some proficiency with the X-15. We're going to put in Evelyn and we're going to put in Kenneth, both into class. Oh, gosh, this will take 130 days? They're going to be retired by then. Oh, but it does increase their date of retirement. Wait a minute, retirement increase averages 146 days? Are you kidding me? Okay, this is going to be fine. I was really worried I was going to need to hire some new pilots. Still going to take a while though. In the meantime, the launch complex for my orbital rocket was complete. This allowed me to tool all those new parts. This cost over 81,000 funds, but was entirely covered by the unlock credits I had accumulated. This rocket is wider than the one I started with, so the complex required a minor 3-day upgrade. After which I discovered that I didn't have enough credits remaining, nor the funds to pay for the unlocking costs of the new parts. I've got some more saving to do before I can even begin integrating this rocket. In the meantime, the X7 was built. Kenneth and Evelyn then completed their proficiency training. Beyond extending their retirement dates, I'm not entirely sure what the proficiency training does, but it still needed to be followed up by specific mission training, all of which wasn't done until we are into October, but it does bring us finally to Evelyn Wolf in our brand new X7 rocket plane. And looking at the contracts, what we have happening here, the main one is this X-Planes Karman Line. So get to an altitude of 100 kilometers with a crew member aboard and come back and land. And again, bonus for landing, it's on the runway in a safe manner, which of course we do plan to do. I am keeping track of a couple of things here. I want to keep track of my attitude control because as the air thins, I'm going to have to reduce the throttle to keep attitude control. But I do want to keep an eye on my apoapsis because I don't want it to get too much over 100 kilometers because, well, as you'll see, re-entry is interesting. Okay, we do have, let's set a waypoint here, and I'm not going to engage in it. Sometimes it just does funny things, and I don't know what that's about. Okay, so we're on our way up, to say the least. I have this set for 100,000 meters. I do not want to go much more than that. There is still a little bit of, I did my best to try and remove the thrust balancing issue. It's still a little bit there. At 50 kilometers, it's where I engage the RCS. There we go. So we'll engage that. That's going to help with the attitude control quite a lot now that the air has very, very much thinned out. Our apoapsis is getting close to 75 kilometers, so I'll probably start reducing throttle soon. The other thing I did do with this thing, let's actually reduce throttle a little bit, is I moved those RCS blocks back so that they will provide more torque. They used to be up here, now they're back here. And they're doing a pretty good job, but I do want to keep an eye on that apoapsis, and I want to keep an eye on my attitude control. The less throttle I get, the less of the thrust torque is a problem. Basically, I am looking at this. When I get to 100.5 kilometers, I'm cutting that throttle. 99, and that's 100, and I want to go a little more. Okay, cut it, cut it, cut it. What the? Oh, I had the. Okay, I went higher than I intended because I was holding the mouse over the orbit info thing, and it was not registering that. Okay, hopefully that won't be a problem. An extra 700 meters because it's a little hot coming in. Okay, now I spent a lot of time. We also did a crude altitude record of 80 kilometers along the way. And we're about to get to the 100 kilometers. Why don't we actually wait for that? 99. 100. I should take vertical motion off. Just let it keep level. Okay, that's that. Now we got to land back here on the runway. Let's attach this to a waypoint. Head back towards the runway. And I played a lot with descent parameters, and I found that an ascent angle of 20 degrees... Note 30 degrees, I made notes, and an altitude here of 20 kilometers seem to work the best as keeping it. You want to come down pretty steep, but you don't want to keep that steep right down. So it's going to try and get down pretty steeply because if it comes down too flat, it's just presenting too much of the plane to the airstream, and it can't handle that amount of structural stress. But you do want to kind of try and level off at a pretty high altitude. And I found 20 kilometers seemed to work pretty well. So I'm just going to really kind of let the plane do its thing. And then once it kind of levels off and it's slowed down enough, I'm able to kind of adjust and fly it the way I do with my regular space planes. But right now, we're on our way down. We don't need this orbital info anymore. We are, of course, collecting that high altitude flight science. We shouldn't forget about that. There's also the potential crew reports once we're over the forest once again. Hopefully we'll get some of that. You can see there's less than 2 minutes of that high altitude flight stuff left. Okay, RCS is kicking back on. It did that by itself. And it's just trying to keep this prograde vector from dipping below 30 degrees. It will not be entirely successful at that, but it's going to try and do its best. But you do want this. I found I needed this climb angle to be pretty steeply downwards so that, as you can see right now, you don't want it too far off this prograde vector. Okay, so it is trying to kind of level off with minimal success. I'm going to turn the RCS off because I don't think it's really doing too much for us. And we're getting to the point here where things are going to get a little bit sketchy. little bit sketchy, a little scary. I'll be honest. Here it comes. Here it comes. A little bit of a heat bar here at the cockpit. And it's going to try and level off. And now the heat bar is going down because our speed has declined enough. And I want to reduce this real quick to 10 degrees. I want to change this altitude to 10 kilometers. Because I don't want it to actually go back up again, which is what it's trying to do right now. Oh, vertical motion on. Come on. There we go. Good boy, good boy, good boy. And heading back towards the runway. I can see I'm a little bit offline here. So heading to the runway is 76. I want to come north of that. So let's make that 70 for now. Wow. And put that on heading. So we come a little bit that way to correct for the fact that we're off. And I just want to, let's put this at 300. Start to really start coming down. And our angle to the runway is 9 degrees. So 10 actually is pretty good. So we'll just come off. There we go. See, and now things are calming down a little bit. Calming down a little bit. We've just gone subsonic. So that is good. We're just going to make our way over to where the runway is. All right, scary stuff is done. Everybody take a breath. It happens so quickly. But then it's okay. And definitely, I think if I'm like this structurally, this is at the end of what this thing could do. I mean, for goodness sakes, this is still the same basic design that goes all the way back to my first X-Plane. I've not really changed it, just changed the materials, changed the engines. Now I've changed the cockpit. I've really done very little to try and make this into an honest-to-goodness space plane. So the fact that actually it's capable of doing this, I'm kind of ecstatic about. If I were to do more with these kind of rocket planes going suborbital, I think I really have to build something from scratch. A little more designed specifically for the purpose. And boom. There we are. Alright. We're down. Crossing the Karman Line and back in less than 15 minutes. So, with the Karman Line contract complete, that leaves only X-Planes Hypersonic to finish off the program. Oh, what's X-Planes Suborbital? X-Planes Suborbital. Reach 110 and come back. Oh, Kenneth, I think you need to one-up Evelyn, but any future flights of this plane are going to have to be for future episodes. In the meantime, I thank you for watching and hope to see you again next time.